So I'm with Planet, as Henry said. I've been there just a few months now, so about 3 months. I'm coming by way of United Launch Alliance, which is the government's largest launch provider for their classified satellites and their NASA satellites. They launched the Atlas and the Delta rockets. And then before that, I worked on the Hill for Ranking Member Honda, who is the top Democrat in the Appropriations Committee for funding commerce, justice, science. And so NASA's in that, NOAA's in that, Department of Commerce is in that. And then before that, I was an astrophysicist. I'm a fallen astrophysicist, much like Pete Worden over there, who's a fellow fallen astrophysicist. There's an army of us. Oh, and I forgot Therese over there, also a fallen astrophysicist. We're taking over the world, you just don't realize it yet. So, I was told to give a brief thoughts on this and then to get the conversation going, and then we'll kind of go around the room and hopefully have something that doesn't get us all fired.
No one's getting fired.
Speak for yourself, I'm being recorded.
We'll erase it for you.
All right, Chief, thanks.
You won't erase it, we control the tape.
Oh, I don't like the sound of that at all.
You're not getting fired.
But I have some embarrassing photos of your CEO.
Oh, God. Okay, so Pete's got my back.
They used to work for me.
Yeah, so I guess with that, I'll just start. I'm here as an individual, so speaking from my experience, working with Planet, working with ULA, working as an appropriator, and I don't represent any of those entities here today, just myself. So I'll start with a little bit of what Planet is, and then I'll go into kind of how we fit into the ecosystem as a private commercial company. So I like props. Henry said he loves props, so I brought a prop. Just make sure we all know what we're talking about here. This is a full-size model of one of our satellites. So it's actually one of our types of satellites. We have 3 types of satellites based because of acquisitions, but this is the one people think about. This is the one that Planet developed. This is called the Dove. It's 3U, if that means something to you. So 1U, 2U, 3U. So it's like a unit of measure. It's 3U in size. It folds up. There's amazing YouTube videos of it being deployed in space. My favorite one is the Indian launch that launched 88 of them in one go. There's a YouTube video if you get bored with nice little classical music. Bum, 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 bum. It's really cute. So we have 150 of them in space right now. So that is the largest constellation of satellites by any company or any country. And so there's about 1,300 operational satellites in low Earth orbit, and we're 150. So we're, what, 12% of all of them. And so we'll get into it in a little bit, but as we hear about some of our colleagues in other companies talk about thousands of satellites in the same orbits that we are, it makes us a little nervous. Would love to have some space traffic management about now. So this is one of the satellites, and the other 2 types are a little larger, about the size of a dorm room fridge. So at Planet, we're 8 years old, and the founders all came from NASA Ames. They're all the children of Pete Worden, which is how I know Pete so well. So they budded off of him, and from that budding, they blossomed into, they left Ames and became a private company. It started with, my understanding is, can they take a cell phone, just a normal cell phone, launch it into space and take pictures? Is it really that hard what the government's been doing since the 60s? Turns out you can do that, and no, it's not that hard. And fast forward 8 years, and we have a constellation of Earth monitoring satellites. So we take a picture of the planet, the entire planet, every single day. So the entire surface of the planet at medium resolution has a new picture every day. So at 10:30 today, you can go outside, look up, wave. A picture was just taken of you. But it's medium resolution, which means we can't see you. So we see cars. So that's a good way to think about it. We can resolve a car, can't resolve human beings. Our secondary constellation called SkySats, acquired through an acquisition, they can see at high resolution, about 0.7 meters. So still not resolving people, but if we all stood together, we could start to see us. But so we're nowhere near the types of intelligent satellites that some of you are used to. So we're not picking up individuals, we're not reading license plates, we're doing nothing like that. But our main mission is to bring the geospatial intelligence information that has for a long time been just the purview of governments, bring that not just to the market that already exists, but bring that to every market that doesn't yet know how much they like it. So our largest customer is actually agriculture, farms. And it's a lot cheaper for them to look at a satellite image every day and watch the fields across the world grow. So they know what the outputs are going to be. They know where there's going to be issues. They know what the yield's going to be. You can take the filters, divide them in the green and blue bands, and you can actually figure out growth. And as we get more and more filter sets on these satellites, that information is going to become more and more useful. Other areas in the commercial side that buy this data, oil companies, looking at roads being developed, looking at ships going through the Panama Canal. We have automatic ship detection. We have automatic building detection. So we work with the Africa Union to look at where buildings are being built in cities in Africa to help those governments plan where their services need to be and where they need to tax. They don't necessarily have as strong of a civil agencies that they know where all the construction is. So there's buildings going up that they're not being taxed. So they're watching these buildings rise, and then they're sending out their services. And it's making for better cities as a result. Working with human rights groups, watching refugees cross, watching floods happen, partnering with FEMA to know what roads are flooded in real time and what roads aren't flooded. Where can they put their resources, where can't they put their resources? In areas where you can't get drones up, you'll have an image of it every day that you can use. So this is kind of, and some people would like to compare it to like a Landsat. So Landsat are these magnificent satellites launched in 1972, and they've been up there ever since. So it's an incredible baseline, 40-year baseline of an image of the world. The filter base and the accuracy of the Landsat instruments are phenomenal. And they are beautiful multi-billion-dollar telescopes as opposed to much less that we have. Landsats image the world at about 30 meters per pixel, so 100 feet per pixel, and we're about 8 feet per pixel. And they image the world every 2 weeks, and we image the world every day. So slight differences there, but we see ourselves as a complement to, not a replacement of, because their instrument suite is so much more advanced. You can imagine we can't fit as much on here as they can. So now that so Planet is and probably why we were invited here, is an ideal example of how industry is taking something that used to be just for US governments or for governments around the world and opening that up truly to anyone who wants to use it. So from the lowest hanging fruits like I talked to you about, and the scientists, the earth scientists using it, but then what excites us the most are who are the customers we haven't thought of yet because they've never used remote sensing data and they just don't know what they can gain from it. I mean, for me, the next barrage of customers is probably going to be stock market. Imagine what you can do if you can see the whole world every day and you can monitor change. You can count crates in every port in the world, and you can know how much shipment is going on. I mean, that would give you huge economic advantage. So this is a wonderful extension of where remote sensing started, with people in balloons in World War I going up, taking pictures of trenches, or even, I don't know if you've seen the images, the doves. We used to put actual pigeons, cameras on their chests, and we'd fly them over into, in World War I, we'd fly them over. They take pictures of usually the ground, sometimes not, and then they hopefully come back and we develop the film. And then from that to U-2s and to SR-71s with the Cuban Missile Crisis, and now to commercial doves. And so the founders have this strong belief, and the company is aligned with, you can't fix what you can't see, and so we want to help provide that global truth, that truth of our world that can be a resource for everyone to use. So the remote sensing market today is about $5 billion, of which 70% of that $5 billion is government. Planet is not, we're interested in that market, but our goal is to get into the the commercial information services, which is $100 to $200 billion market. So that's where we're trying to make a stab at. We're not trying to become another government prime or another aerospace company that builds satellites for the intelligence community. We're instead interested in the larger market, of which we would like to have the government as an anchor tenant. So currently the government, all the governments are about 20% of our business. US government, namely NRO, NGA, from the IC side, from the intelligence side, and NASA are our customers on the government side today. We'd certainly like to grow that, But we do not have the intention of that becoming our base market. And so we sell data, not satellites. So we do not build satellites or instruments for any customer. Instead, we sell them the data that we take down, both from the medium resolution doves as well as the higher resolution SkySat data. It's worth pointing out that we launch about 1/3 of our satellite fleet every year. And as we launch upgraded models. So with every launch, there'll be several test demos launched with every launch. And those test demos, if they pan out, will become the next series. So we are constantly upgrading our fleet. So every 3 years, our entire constellation is essentially updated. So as we've broken out of the paradigm of 5 years to design it, 5 years to build it, 15 years to operate it. At the end of life, you have a 25-year-old system. We are every 3 years a completely new upgraded system in perpetuity, forever. Always backward compatible. So our ideal will be to line up with the Landsat and Sentinel data so that we extend that 1972 baseline of the Earth all the way back, which would be fabulous. So one of the questions that Henry raised was, how dependent will the commercial space ventures in the US and abroad be on securing national military contracts versus private contracts? I think we're an example of where private contracts are leading the way for us, and we'd like to keep it that way. But certainly the military side, we would like to continue to be part of, to be an anchor tenant for us. And this is more of a challenge than maybe you first realized. So we have an IC and a national security world that grew up using certain assets. They use tasking-based assets, namely. So these are large, beautiful, magnificent systems, multi-billion-dollar systems that my previous employer launched for them. So massive sizes of trucks, the weight of tanks, huge systems put up there. Imaging, wonderful things at resolutions that cannot be talked about. So that's what they grew up on. So that's the tasking they know. They have a subject of interest, they task their satellite, they get exquisite, small field of view, exquisite resolution. Changing that paradigm to complement that with a medium resolution at 8 feet, or even a 0.7 meter resolution, takes effort, because they grew up doing that. They're literally, it's on their system is to work on the high side, the classified side, what they do. Now we're coming at them with commercial data, truly open source data. How can they use that to complement their thinking? So we have seen great support from the brass on the IC side, from the generals, from the political leadership, from all the PowerPoint slides the Air Force can possibly bring together, which is a lot. Great support there, but the challenge is getting the users, so getting it down into the kernel level, setting the requirement level, and getting them to actually push it to the actual analysts to use this commercial data as a complement to the data that they grew up with and are very comfortable with. And so that's where we are today. That's our challenge today with the US government, is to grow that area. And to be very frank, scientists are no better. Scientists working with NASA, that's our challenge with them too. NASA scientists grew up using Landsat. And even though this data is daily cadence and it's at 10 times the spatial resolution, getting them to change their thought process and their paradigm to use us as a complement and a supplement is proving challenging. So that, as a company, for the government side, is where we are today. So we have a lot of people focusing on the analytics side. About half of our company on the engineering side is now programming. So they're doing machine learning and AI. So with that, we were primarily just a spacecraft company, and now we are transitioning to a data company. So just to give you some perspective, we bring down 6 terabytes of data every day. By the end of the year, that'll be closer to 10 terabytes a day. And within a few years, that number will grow even more. So at 10 terabytes a day, I take, so those of you who know me, I take a lot of selfies, a unhealthy amount of selfies. But 6 terabytes a day is an untenable amount of data. No human being will look at that data, ever, ever. So we're completely dependent on the analytics, on the machine learning, on the AI, on the training sets that we give it to get useful data out. So the lowest hanging fruit for us is building detection, road detection, ship detection, airplane detection. So these are the simplest things that you can train the machine, the computer to find, and then if there's a change, just change in any way, and it's in an area where one of our customers cares, an email goes out. It's like a supernova warning that some of my astrophysics colleagues know about. When there's a detection, an email goes out to the network, and then telescopes start to slew and stare at it. Much in the same way, when change is detected somewhere in an area we care about, for a customer we care about, our goal is to be able to ping those customers to let them know that a change was detected, and that then a human being will enter the loop and actually look at that change. And if they want to put more assets on it, so be it. If they want to task one of ours or some other company's assets, so be it. But it's another data point that goes into the calculus for a company or for national security interests. So many data points that go into figuring out risks and non-risks. This would be one of them. Okay. In terms of barriers and enablers, so the U.S. government, I read your paper, right? And you discussed the size of the space market and how the U.S. government is still a major leader in that economically. And the U.S. as in general, we are a major leader in shaping those, in that landscape. And the U.S. will most likely maintain that leadership for quite some time. So what we need from the government is that leadership. We need areas of specific concern to us. Space traffic management is a growing concern. And within that, we have ASAT tests. That we had one that recently just went off. You might have seen our founders responded the same day as it went off. We're actually, as far as I know, we're the only company in country that reacted that quickly to say anything about India blowing up a satellite and sending debris everywhere. And we said it because it went right into our orbits, despite the press that they put out saying that all of their debris was going to burn up in the atmosphere. It did not. It is still very much up there, as high as 800 kilometers, which puts even our astronauts are within that range. So we got a conjunction warning, just to highlight this one point, a small example. We got a conjunction warning a month ago from that Indian ASAT test, in which they told us we could get a piece of debris from that test within 30 meters of one of our satellites. That's 100 feet. That's in space, that's very close. And the error bar on that warning was 1 kilometer. So we looked at it and we're like, thanks for calling. I mean, we do nothing. What do you do with that? 30 feet plus or minus 1 kilometer. So that's not useful information. It's nice to know that, to watch the pulse of a satellite to see if it stops. But I mean, we can't move it if it's 1 kilometer error bar, right? So we need to improve that. And that leadership needs to come from the government on that. The U.S. setting the tone, Europe will likely follow or participate in that tone, and with that, other players in the world will follow and participate in that as well. And so if we are not, as a country, going to set that tone, the tone will set itself, because no longer is space the player for just 3 or 4 countries. Space is now very much open. We're a scrappy company out of Silicon Valley, and we have the largest constellation in the world. So just imagine what's going to be up there in 10, 15 years. So no longer can we bottle it all in and say it's US government only or something. So we need to set tones in a serious way, or it's going to get unruly very quickly. Another area, well, I guess along that line, we have OneWeb and SpaceX both talking about constellations of 1,000 satellites or more. And there was a comment made at another event, I guess I won't attribute it, in which this person said, space is big, so this person wasn't concerned about space traffic management. My eyes are still rolling back and recovering from that. Yeah, okay, so I'm an astronomer. Space is quite large, but space that we care about is very small, actually. So now geosynchronous orbit is much bigger. It's just a radius thing, right? You go farther out, turns out your sphere is bigger. You get closer in, your sphere shrinks. So therefore, things get closer together. So in low Earth orbit, where we are, and where all these massive constellations are talking about, OneWeb, SpaceX, and others, low Earth orbit, as the L implies, is close. Therefore, that space is relatively small. And so I do think about space traffic management, and we definitely do think about that, and that is a leading concern. Spectrum is a concern for us. That's an ongoing conversation now with the FCC. We might not be who you normally think about in terms of spectrum. Usually when you talk about spectrum, you're thinking about telecommunications providers, thinking about the geosatellite birds, you're thinking about cable TV and such, and internet. But we need spectrum too, both to observe in. You heard a lot of scientists have gotten very upset recently about one of the spectrum bands actually is a water band. So they're talking about opening up a piece of the spectrum that for communications, that water lines, if you know a water spectrum, the emission and absorption features are actually in that band. And so that's a band used by Earth scientists to measure the health of the Earth. And so NOAA and NASA got quite irate over that. And that is an ongoing conversation. That is not resolved. It's unclear whether or not the FCC will, how they will deal with that. But we care about spectrum for communications up and down to our satellites. We care about spectrum for our users, for our filters, to make sure that we operate mostly in the visible, in the near infrared, but some of our colleagues operate in other bands. And so having spectrum well protected and well understood on a global scale is very important to us. Licensing is really important to us. So when we went to NOAA, so we're licensed through NOAA. NOAA licensed all of our satellites. When we first started going, they kind of laughed at us because NOAA's standard was like 3 or 4 satellites licensed a year. And then here we show up saying like, we'd like to license 100 satellites, and next year we got another 100 for you. And they're looking at us, they had no. So we grew with NOAA. They didn't believe us, I think. But we grew with NOAA, and actually we have a great relationship with the NOAA licensing group because that office and us as a company grew together. So, and they had to grow, and we had to help them grow because they needed to license us. And now we're seeing that again. So it's been about 10 years since we've had major legislation on licensing, and this administration has put out a big push for streamlining regulation, and the one that's getting a lot of attention is on launch side. With my old company, we worked with that, streamlining launch regulation, but they're also talking about streamlining remote sensing legislation, and streamlining spectrum legislation. And so all of these are a big push for this current administration. And so an NPRM just came out, and Kevin isn't here yet, so I can talk about him. So that NPRM came out, and industry is pretty united that work is needed. That current NPRM is missing the mark, and that in fact is not helping encourage industry move forward, and we need to work better with commerce, that in the desire for speed, we don't miss the train completely. And this market is changing so fast, and our world is so international now, that if the United States does not make an environment that is healthy for commercial enterprise, it is not that hard for those companies to just go elsewhere. And so we need to ensure as a group here and as an agency, as a government, that we create a vibrant ecosystem here and a vibrant regulatory system here that both protects our national security as well as enables commerce to thrive here.